Hello, and welcome to Outer Monologues, the show where I talk. My name is Castor Köhler, and today I will be talking about the worth of a life. So, just as a quick disclaimer, these are my personal thoughts on this subject. I don't do any specific research beforehand, and so this is purely the inner monologue going on in my head, but spoken out loud. So if I do make any factual mistakes that you want to correct me on, you can reach me on Instagram at Outer Monologues Podcast or by email at outermonologuespodcast@gmail.com. So on to the subject of today. Today we will partly be talking about a very classical philosophical subject. But this all started when last week I watched the very now famous documentary called Seaspiracy by Kip Anderson. It's on Netflix and I highly recommend you watch it. It was fascinating. It's kind of a shock documentary about saving the oceans. So as you might expect, it did handle some information about plastics in the ocean and kind of it started from there and then it moved onwards as the film progressed. So it started moving towards first the killing of dolphins and whales and somehow ended up in the end at fishing and what that all entails. But there also, entailed killing of dolphins and stuff. So bringing this up, of course, you might think that this episode is about how we're going to ruin the planet and how everything is going to shit, basically. But that isn't the case. Because the thing that actually got stuck on my mind from that documentary, of course, not putting aside the main point of that movie, I think it was a bit exaggerated because it is a shock documentary, but of course it is a very valid problem in our modern society. But that's actually not what got stuck on my mind after watching the documentary. So what I actually got caught on, is it was the fact that it was the point in the film where they went to Svalbard to watch these people do they do this whale fishing ritual activity thing that is considered actually one of the more sustainable types of whale killing, whale fishing, what you want to call it. But they went and filmed it there and showed how it goes. And basically, they drive a lot of whales from the area into the coast and then basically half beach them. And then when they go close to the shore, they kill them off and they drag them up on land. And that way they kill a lot. But they only do it, once a year? And it's like they get a lot out of it. So the documentary actually it interviewed one of these people that was that participated in this activity, and he kind of pointed out that he gets a lot of hate from the fact that he kills whales, and of course because that is in our modern society at least it's seen as a kind of an objective bad thing to do. If you kill whales, you're a bad guy. That's a no-no, big no-no. But he put an interesting argument. Of course, this maybe only applies in the case where he does this fishing in a sustainable manner, but it does bring up a interesting point. So what he argued was that he kills one whale. So if he kills one whale, he gets a ton of meat out of it. He said something about there being a meat for his family for months. I don't know. I don't remember what he exactly the numbers were or how long it was, but something in that the ballpark, let's say, for a long time. He got a lot of meat for a long time that for his family to eat. And then he kind of compared this to killing a chicken and what that does. And killing a chicken, you get quite little meat. You maybe, let's say tops, you get meat for a week for yourself. And that's not even for a family. And he kind of weighed this as not as you kill a the environmental impact or anything about killing a chicken versus killing a whale, but he weighed it versus the worth of their lives. So basically, what he was saying is that the life of a whale and the life of a chicken is equal. They're equal, and therefore, by killing a whale, you would get more useful resources. You would get more gain out of killing a whale than killing a chicken. And this is a very classical philosophical problem, or maybe it will boil down to a very very classical philosophical problem. And let's first just say that I won't, basically during this episode, I won't go into the details of like vegetarianism and everything, because if you don't feel like killing an animal or killing anything is ever correct to do, then this basically a lot of this episode doesn't really apply, because it's kind of unnecessary to go ahead and weigh the high potential worths of animal lives against each other if you think that you shouldn't kill any lives. So, so I will completely just put that aside, and that isn't maybe relative in this episode. But what this boils down to is basically a version of the classical trolley problem in philosophy. So I think the classical trolley problem, this is one of the points where I'm not sure I'm absolutely correct, but that it's basically you're on a train or on a trolley going down a railroad track. It's about to hit 5 people, but you have the possibility to steer it away, but then it will kill one person, and that person. Basically the question in this scenario is that when you have to actually make a conscious decision to kill the one person and to save the 5 people, and what that does over just not doing anything and letting 5 people die instead of 1. But this is kind of more of a scenario actually. The fishing scenario is more of a scenario where you have you need to turn left or right. It isn't by default going down any track. You need to choose which one is better, and so you kind of need to weigh these lives against each other and see what's more worth. And if it were that they had the same value, that the worth of a chicken's life and the worth of a whale's life are equal. And then if we put aside the fact that, well, if we say that the environmental cost and the actual financial cost as well would be the same for each kilogram of chicken or each kilogram of meat, so the gain of each animal is equal, then it would make no sense to be farming chickens and to kill chickens in such amounts that we do ever, basically, because we could do that same with whales, and just eat them, and then would kill less things, and wouldn't that be better? Yes, but subsequently also by basically saying that we get more out of saying that their lives' worth is the same, then you kind of get into the fact that if they are the same, but one gives you more gain, then is it actually the same, the life? Because if you're going at they have the same life, but you get more gain out of one, so you should kill it. Doesn't that make it implicitly that the whale's life is worth less because you would sacrifice it? I know this is kind of it's kind of impossible to reach a position where the worth of each life is actually equal, because I guess there might be some sort of like equilibrium in between these two extremes, but at least it isn't, in my opinion, that you can have like their lives are worth the same amount. Just it doesn't make sense. And this is kind of a thing that has been talked a lot about, or I've heard a lot about at least, when it comes to the worth of humans. Because with humans, it's a lot more, let's say, there's a lot more factors involved. Basically, we don't count in as many factors. We don't count in personality traits of animals as much, or anything when we think about the worth of their lives. But rather but when we talk about humans, we start taking these things into account, and this is a very old thing to philosophize over, but I will do it anyway. So the question is just simply that, can one human be worth more than another, simply objectively? Is there anything that basically differs between people when it comes to the cost of their lives and their worth? And in that case, where does that worth come from? So I think the main thoughts around this is that it's all surrounding societal values. This concept of which life is worth more, if I guess it kind of, at least for me personally, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, or most people would agree with this, that there is some sort of difference between the worth of different people's lives. If it wasn't the case, then you would say, for example, that someone that has done a lot of good for the world, let's say someone that is maybe not as in a way political, let's say, for example, Albert Einstein, which did a lot of science-y stuff, and he brought a lot of good to the world that way, that his worth is the same as someone that has done a ton of evil things. This time I will go political, and I will say the classical, what if you compare Albert Einstein's life and his worth compared to Hitler? And I think most people will agree that after, maybe as a ground point, when you're born into the world, if you're not racist or phobic of any sort of human-related attributes that you have at birth, then you can, I think it's quite like fair to say that everyone has the same value. And then when you grow up, you live your own life, you make decisions, you have values, your own personal values and your morals, and the actions you do somehow shifts the scale over the course of your life. And at some point you gain a higher value than someone else, and you can also decrease your value, because I think it's easier to think of a system where you start at a base level that is the average human that basically does as much good as he or she does bad. And of course, I would say that people like Hitler or any dictator, basically, or just a lot of, basically also a lot of capitalist swines nowadays, and people that abuse systems and abuse people for their own gain, can be smaller scales as well, that they decrease their value. I don't mind saying that I think they're worth less than me, for example, because I don't think I do bad things, at least. But I would also say that there's people that are worth more than me, because they've simply contributed more to humankind than others. But what have they? What do we base these worths on? So is this just something that we think now is good for society or for humankind? Is it something that needs to basically it has an application pending that at some point you will kind of get accepted into the good people club with more or less good points than others? Where do we base these? Of course, I think the only logical is that how well it corresponds with our modern values, and we can look back of how much it has basically given to humankind if it's a historical person. Another interesting part, or another interesting factor in this discussion, is age. And does age contribute or decrease? Does it affect your value as a human person? And this is a difficult question, because I don't know. It's a difficult question, because I really think that, let's say, very old people, they have the same value. Of course, they're lovely beings usually, and they provide much happiness into the world still and everything. But it is a fact that they have lived a longer. They have already done most of their contributing as a practical contributions to society and to humankind. Comparing that to a younger person, especially if you take like a baby, then you have someone that has still the potential to grow up and do amazing things and do so much good. On the other hand, an old person, you can go and look at their life and see what have they done. Have they done good things? Have they done bad things? Then you compare this to the average baby, and you're left with a statistical question. Does the average person do well? So it's kind of all based on the fact do we think that an average human is good for society, good for humankind? Because if it is, then I would say that on average that this baby is probably more worth to humankind. It still doesn't make it correct to kill anyone, to do any sort of trade. I don't know, some very morbid scenario of trading old people for young people at a certain rate. I don't know. This is all in hypotheticals. Remember that. But it does. It's an interesting thing to think about, because if you think that an average person at some point, let's say that the average net impact on humankind is a graph, then if that graph dips below zero, so on average you damage humankind, or you bring a net loss to humankind, I guess. Then an older person might be more worth simply because you can see what they have done, and of course, if it's someone that has done terrible things, then their worth might be less. But you get my point. So this is a fascinating question to think about, and there's like countless different factors that you can go through and think about in this fashion. For example, I'm not going to talk about it, but I can throw out to you. How about hobbies? How about interests? Does it make a difference if you're interested in technology things, if you're interested in gardening, if you're interested in just physical exercise? Does that make any difference for you? Does it make a difference what line of work you are in? Of course you can. In that case, there are some guidelines maybe and some moral guidelines you can follow, but you can maybe find two neutral, basically same that have quite moral neutral values, and then see that are still in very different industries, and see, does that somehow affect everything? I encourage you to think about this. It's a fun exercise to think about. For example, when you go on a walk or something. But actually, I'm gonna go back a bit to where we were, because that was the most fascinating thing I have found with the documentary that I was watching, is that I have never thought about this, how it affects animals. It's a very classical question when it comes to humans and human worth and the worth of how you basically pin two people against each other and see who's worth more. But it's seldom applied to animals, and usually the talk is around: is it okay to abuse animals in any way? Is it okay to eat meat? That's maybe a bit more drastic because it's about killing. Is it okay to kill animals actually? But you have more nuanced questions. Is it okay to drink milk because milk is basically the food for their babies? Is it okay to eat honey because, well, honey is basically just a byproduct of their living, of the bees living, and all sorts of these questions. But it's rarely talked about, is the worth of their lives actually equal? So I implore you to think about it a bit more. I think I have said all I had to say about this subject. So if you have any more questions, you can also follow me on Instagram. I really encourage you to do that. And maybe I usually post a picture each week. And I really implore you to, after you've listened, go there and in the comments and maybe write something what you thought about the subject, and if it sparked any thoughts in you that you want to share. Yeah. So that's basically gonna be it for this episode. Other things happening in my life, we can go over. I still work full time. I'm sorry it's been 3 weeks now since the last episode. I said 2 weeks. It went to 3 weeks. I didn't find the time and the motivation to do this, but now I did, so you're welcome, I guess. And it was fun again to do this. I also started streaming on Twitch when I play games with my friends and I talk to you guys. So if you're into that sort of things, go check me out at Twitch TV/Flavionator. That's FLAVIONATOR. So you can see me streaming there most afternoon, evenings, finish time, and well, I'll see how long I want to do that. It's been real fun so far, so I hope to be doing that, and that's a bit more chill, and you can come there and hang out and talk to me. Other than that, I guess I only have the classical things to say, that music in today's episode was made by Nuori Hector. I hope you all take care of each other, and I hope you all have a wonderful spring and continue to live your lives to the fullest. My name is Castor Köhler, and I'm out.
I pay the price for living faster than I may. Lord have mercy on this wondrous day. Come on, lay down your head now and try to go to sleep.